Did you know that since 1970, the Earth's temperature has increased by about 1.2 degrees Celsius? This may sound small, but it has led to more extreme weather, rising sea levels, and disappearing ice caps. In fact, climate change is causing natural disasters at an alarming rate. Over 100 million people are displaced each year due to climate-related events. Despite this, many people believe that simply living sustainably can solve our climate crisis. But here's the shocking truth: individual actions alone won't cut it. While composting, using reusable bags, and driving electric cars are commendable, they won't make enough of an impact to reverse the damage done. According to the Carbon Disclosure Project, just 100 companies are responsible for over 70% of global emissions. That's right, your choices matter, but they're dwarfed by industrial pollution. In this video, we'll dive deep into why sustainable living isn't enough to combat climate change on its own. We'll explore the myths surrounding personal responsibility, the dangers of greenwashing, and the urgent need for systemic change. You'll learn how collective action and strong policies can create a lasting impact, and why we must look beyond individual swaps to address this global challenge. Get ready to challenge your thinking and discover how we can truly make a difference, together. Let's explore the powerful role of community, policy, and innovation in our fight against climate change. Chapter 1: The Sustainability Myth. Why your compost bin isn't enough. We've all heard it. Every little bit helps. And sure, using a compost bin or bringing a reusable bag to the grocery store is better than doing nothing. But here's the hard truth: these individual efforts aren't enough to stop climate change. In fact, focusing only on personal habits can distract from the bigger picture. According to a 2017 report, 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global industrial emissions. So, while you're sorting your recycling, these corporations are churning out emissions at a scale that's hard to comprehend. It's not that personal actions are useless, but they're just a drop in the ocean. To really make a difference, we need to think about systems. Changing how we live our daily lives is important, but what we really need are large-scale shifts, things like clean energy policies, corporate accountability, and government regulations. It's like trying to empty a bathtub with a spoon when the tap is still running. Take renewable energy, for example. Denmark now gets 50% of its electricity from wind power, thanks to government-backed initiatives. Compare that to the US, where renewable energy makes up only 20% of electricity generation. The impact of policy-driven changes dwarfs individual actions. This isn't to say you should throw in the towel on composting. It's about shifting our focus. Personal sustainability practices can be the gateway to bigger actions, like voting for leaders who prioritize climate policies or supporting companies with transparent environmental standards. So, while your compost bin helps, remember that systemic change is what truly moves the needle. Chapter 2: Greenwashing Unveiled. Corporate hype versus real solutions. We've all been there, standing in the store, looking at a product that's labeled eco-friendly or green. But how often do we stop to wonder if it's all just marketing hype? This is what's known as greenwashing, when companies make something sound environmentally responsible without really doing much to help. Greenwashing has exploded in recent years. A study from TerraChoice found that 98% of products with green labels were misleading in some way. Companies know that consumers want to feel good about their purchases, so they slap on a green logo, hoping you won't ask too many questions. But real sustainability requires more than just buying a green product. The fashion industry is one of the biggest culprits. Brands might promote an eco-friendly clothing line, but the same company could still be involved in polluting factories or unethical labor practices. Fast fashion alone produces 10% of global carbon emissions, more than all international flights and shipping combined. What we need is transparency. Patagonia, for example, doesn't just market itself as sustainable. The company provides detailed reports on its supply chain and environmental impact. This level of transparency allows consumers to make more informed choices. But here's the kicker: even transparent brands can't solve climate change alone. We need to hold companies accountable on a much larger scale, demanding that they not only reduce emissions but also invest in greener technology and practices. Supporting brands that align with true sustainability principles is a good start, but pressuring industries to overhaul their operations is where real change will happen. Chapter 3: The Carbon Trap. Why small steps can't balance big emissions. So you're trying to lower your carbon footprint, maybe by biking to work or cutting back on meat. These steps are great, but let's put things into perspective. The average American's carbon footprint is around 16 tons per year. Meanwhile, the global average is closer to 4.8 tons. The problem is, individual actions, while noble, barely scratch the surface compared to the emissions from industries. Here's an interesting fact. In just 2021, the fossil fuel industry alone emitted over 36 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide globally. To put that in perspective, 1 year of emissions from this industry is like running 50 million airplanes non-stop for a year. So while it's great that you're cutting back on flights, industrial emissions need to be addressed to make a real dent. Carbon offsets are often sold as the solution, but they can be misleading. Companies sometimes use offsets as a way to continue their polluting habits. They'll fund tree planting or renewable energy projects while keeping their main operations unchanged. According to a 2020 ProPublica report, some offset projects actually worsen environmental issues because they aren't managed correctly. We need to be smarter about where we focus our efforts. Shifting to renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, and rethinking how we use land are some of the strategies that can cut emissions in meaningful ways. Denmark's wind energy success story is one model, but countries like Costa Rica, which generates 99% of its electricity from renewables, prove that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. At the end of the day, individual actions are important, but we have to recognize their limits. Without addressing the big players, fossil fuels, industrial agriculture, and transportation, climate change will continue to escalate. So, yes, go ahead and make those small changes, but push for the big ones too. That's where the real impact lies. If you're finding this information helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insights on sustainable living and climate action. Chapter 4, Systems over Swaps. The urgent need for policy change. We're constantly told that if we just make the right swaps, like using metal straws or switching to electric cars, we can fix climate change. But individual swaps can only go so far. What we really need are system-level changes that target the root causes of the problem. Take renewable energy, for example. While you can install solar panels on your home, widespread policy changes can have a much larger impact. Look at Germany's Energiewende program. It's a national initiative that has led to a significant shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Since the early 2000s, the country has reduced its carbon emissions by nearly 25%. That's the power of a government-backed program. On the flip side, countries like the US struggle to make meaningful progress on climate because of inconsistent energy policies. Fossil fuel subsidies continue to outpace renewable energy investments, with over $20 billion in direct subsidies still going to oil and gas each year. No matter how many individuals make the switch to cleaner energy, this imbalance makes progress difficult. Policy also matters when it comes to transportation. Electric vehicles are often promoted as a fix, but in 2023, less than 10% of global car sales were electric. That's not enough. Countries like Norway, where EVs now make up nearly 80% of new car sales, show that with the right government incentives, this shift can happen much faster. The point here is that while individual swaps are helpful, the real game changer is systemic policy reform. Governments need to push for stronger regulations, phase out fossil fuels, and invest in sustainable infrastructure. Without these larger changes, our personal swaps won't add up to the climate impact we need. Chapter 5, Collective Power. The role of communities in climate activism. Sustainable living often feels like a solo mission. But if you're really aiming for long-term impact, collective action is the key. Individual efforts are important, but communities can amplify their power when they work together. Let's look at some real-world examples. In 2016, the city of Copenhagen set an ambitious goal to become carbon neutral by 2025. But instead of putting all the responsibility on individuals, the city focused on community-wide efforts. They redesigned public transportation, invested in cycling infrastructure, and implemented city-wide recycling programs. Today, Copenhagen is on track to meet its goal, and residents play a part in it because the changes are accessible to everyone. Communities can also push for corporate accountability. Look at the #Stop Adani movement in Australia. What started as a small group of activists grew into a national movement that pressured large banks and companies to pull their funding from a coal mine project. This collective action has delayed the project for years, proving that communities can take on even the largest corporations when they come together. On a smaller scale, community gardens and local clean energy cooperatives are growing in popularity. These initiatives give people the chance to not only live more sustainably but to actively build alternatives to the existing systems. A study from the University of California, Berkeley, found that local renewable energy projects in the US have created over 300,000 jobs in the last decade, showing the economic power of collective sustainability. The takeaway here is that individual actions are great, but when they're part of a broader, community-driven effort, their impact multiplies. Working together, communities can demand better policies, create sustainable infrastructure, and push for systemic change in ways that no single person can. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about making a real impact on climate change, please subscribe to our channel for future content. Together, we can create a sustainable future.